Welcome to the Matchbook Betting Podcast, where we're focusing on a cracking weekend of action in the Rugby World Cup. We'll be taking an in-depth preview of England-Argentina later and covering all of the big games from the weekend. And joining me to do that is Aidan Sully O'Sullivan. Welcome, Sully.
Hey, Al. I do not know what to make of this World Cup. I don't know if I like it or if I hate it. It's probably more in the latter column. I haven't been in good form picking the totals and the sides with the point spreads, which I've been kind of pretty much slated on Twitter last weekend. Rightly so. I will say.
Gotta take the hits.
Got to take the hits. The NFL has been good this year, so we've got to take the hits on the rugby. But yeah, look, 20 minutes into that Ireland-Japan game, minus 9.5 in the first half. Like, I just thought, we were well up here, 12-3 up, kicking on. The Irish looking fantastic, and then it just all goes to pot, as Mark O'Haire knows only too well. Yeah,
joining us as well as always, Mark. We love betting's Mark O'Haire. Mark, how's your tournament been going so far?
A massive roller coaster, if honest. It's been difficult. It's been tricky. We've talked about the conditions and the climate too many times to make it interesting still, but I'm starting to get a bit of a handle now. Like, I'm just ignoring the rain and the potential typhoons, looking more towards the humidity and seeing how that affects handling conditions, because it has. And not just that as well, it's the general fitness and fatigue of these teams who aren't used to it. And I think there's many reasons why Ireland lost to Japan last weekend. The obvious one being Japan were the better team on the day, but I don't think the Irish coped with the humidity very well either. And they're not the only ones to suffer so far. So I'm certainly looking towards that more as the competition goes on, rather than just sort of looking at rain patterns and wind and how that might affect matches. So, yeah, one to keep an eye on. Maybe as the tournament progresses, teams will get more accustomed to it the longer they're out there. But, it's been an odd tournament, 2 massive shocks already. But from a punter's perspective, it's been pretty tricky. I guess from neutrals, it's been fantastic. But we're here to try and make money. So I've tried to find a few things that are very interesting this week.
Yeah, I mean, last week probably wasn't the best one from a money-making perspective for us three, if we're perfectly honest. I mean, Ireland, Japan, what went wrong there? Was that a bad call? Was it just, I mean...
Well, in Mark's defence, Mark actually recommended Japan plus 21, so let's bow down to that one. That was a pretty good one. And I mean, look, even at half-time there, I mean, you saw Japan creeping into the last 15 minutes of the first half, and you could still back them plus 13 or plus 14 at half time, which is, incredible. I mean, look, obviously, and that's what I'm saying before, when we're looking at the pre-match point spreads, they don't adjust enough at half time for the eye test. Like, those models can't see what's going on. Like Mark said, the Irish are struggling with humidity. The Japanese intensity was off the charts. They were hitting rocks. Their defense was superb, and they just looked up for it. Whereas the Irish just looked like just didn't want to be there, in all honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mark mentioned something in our outright preview that we did before the action kicked off about tier 2 teams covering handicaps in World Cup games. I mean, is that a trend that we're kind of seeing so far? I mean, it's always bad to overreact to a couple of games, but I mean, is that something that people should maybe be taking a closer look at?
I think so. I don't know what Sully says, but I certainly think so. I think the further we're going out into the competition, you've got to be a little bit more careful, because teams have got injuries, suspensions, fatigue creeping into the legs. I'm always keen to get them on side in the first 2 rounds of matches, considering the schedule, if they have got a decent rest in their legs. The Japanese, it wasn't complacency from Ireland's perspective, I don't believe. Joe Schmidt would have known all about their approach and what they were going to try and do. We all knew what their approach was going to be. They were trying to keep the ball in play for as long as possible, chuck it around, run the legs off Ireland, and they did. So there was no surprises there, and they're going to try and do the same thing to Scotland in the last game, as well as Samoa this weekend. So getting back to your question, I think from what I've seen, I think favourites are covering the spread more often than underdogs thus far. I'm not sure how that pans out for tier 1 v tier 2, but I think the longer we get into the competition, I'm getting a little bit more wary supporting the underdogs with big handicap starts.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a few of those this weekend, but before we get to those, I think we've got to just man up and deal with talking about England for 10 minutes, haven't we, guys? I mean, it's an absolutely cracking game coming up this weekend, England-Argentina. There's a very odd dynamic in that pool, which maybe we might focus on a little bit later. But before we do that, Sally, run us through how the betting's looking on Matchbook at the minute for England and
Yeah,
Argentina.
it's quite interesting, this market. I mean, it kind of opened about the 12-13 mark, got bet up. I've seen a couple of sports books there are going about 15 to 16 at the moment, which is probably getting a bit too high. But at Matchbook, minus 14.5 if you want to back Eddie Jones. England total is at 47.5.
How are you seeing this one, Mark? What's your kind of view on this game?
Yeah, I think England have played the conditions better than most. They had quite a short turnaround between their first two games, rested and rotated. The squad performed very well, picked up bonus points. They were quite workmanlike in the first game. Took a while to get that bonus point, but they have looked at a very powerful animal, the kind of team that we've come to expect under Eddie Jones in the last 12, 18 months. A very strong bench there as well. And they're confident as well, which is always quite concerning for an opposition team against England.
Yeah.
Head-to-head, obviously very strong in England's favour. They've won the last 10 since 2009. They've not actually beaten this handicap total, won by more than 14 points since 2013. The last four fixtures between the two teams settled by 13, 4, 10 and 13. And I think if you can get Argentina with a plus 14.5 start, now I know Sully's going to oppose me on this, I think that's appealing enough for me. This match is taking place in the same stadium which Wales and Australia played in last weekend, where the humidity was a factor. It will be a factor again this weekend. And I just look at Eddie Jones's team. He's never beaten Argentina by more than 14. As I said, admittedly, none of those games have been quite as significant as a World Cup. But I think this is Argentina's last chance. It's their last opportunity to really put on a show. Their last 8 defeats have all been by a margin of fewer than this total. I've seen many times the track record of Argentina is dreadful. Yes, it is. But you've got to take into account that 70% of their matches recently have been against the Southern Hemisphere powerhouses, and they have been competitive. Look at the Rugby Championship, 3 of their 4 games, which ended in defeat, were by 7 points or fewer. The last time they lost by this margin or more in the World Cup was 2011 against the All Blacks in Auckland. That day they were trailing 18-10 after 65 minutes with 6 New Zealand kicks. Obviously this team is nowhere near as strong as that team of 8 years ago, but Argentina backed into a corner. They're one of the few teams who are going to fight tooth and nail, be as dogged as they come. They're very difficult to sort of tame, and selection-wise I have a few concerns about them. Dropping Sanchez from the squad altogether is a little bit confusing, but I think Ledesma is probably aware that his team have shown a lack of attacking ability, a few limitations in that team in the last 12 months, not scoring enough tries or points, and England's defence has been very, very strong. But one thing that surprised me, and I think probably all three of us, has been Argentina's set piece, which was very strong, very competitive, especially against France. And I think if they can front up, they've got an opportunity here, because there's a fine line between kind of confidence and arrogance in this England team. And there's also my question marks over the leadership and discipline. And I think this is the kind of team, if momentum starts to shift against them, Argentina, as we saw in that first game against France, are very, very dangerous. And I don't think it'd be a huge surprise to see them finish within 2 scores. I do expect England to win, of course, but I'm ignoring that game against Tonga for Argentina. They scored the 28 points, got the bonus point, and then almost just kind of gave up, because this is what it's all about for them. I think the schedule's been reasonably kind for them. I think this is 3 Saturday games on the spin. I just think it's a big handicap, especially in this World Cup with the humidity against them. And we've seen that in quite a few games now. And I just think England, who have got a past record since 2018 of losing to basically all the Tier 1 nations, bar Argentina, it's a big ask for them to overcome this kind of handicap. So I'd be interested to hear Sully's case against it. But for me, it's Argentina with a start.
Come on then, Sully. Tell us why you love England so much.
It's as much about loving England as hating Argentina, in all honesty, right? So, I mean, look, the Nicolas Sanchez thing, I would have suggested it's probably trouble in the camp there somewhere, that he's out of the squad, because, I mean, look, he's back up in the 23 is Lucas Mensah, who's a centre, who has a small bit of game time at fly half, but not enough to justify him coming off the bench. And when Mark is saying there about, their attack game struggling, I mean, you look at the 10 there, or the Belletta, who plays with Cast in the top 14, and, he's a kicking fly half. He's not a guy who will majorly get that back line moving. And I just, in all honesty, the guy that impressed me most probably during Super Rugby in the 10 shirt, and he's not in the squad, is Bonilla, who should be in the squad. He should be there ahead of Orbiteta, and he would have been a good guy to probably bring in for this one. You look at the performance against Tonga, and I mean, look, that was a game, they did so well in the first half and then just didn't play in the second half. No, obviously what Mark is saying, that has happened. That is a bit of a trade in this tournament that teams can't sustain for 80 minutes. But the 28 missed tackles against Tonga would worry me in a massive way because, that's against Tonga. And this English side, with the exception of Joe Marler at number one, when Mako Vunipola comes back next week or the week after, this is their absolute best side, in my opinion. He's absolutely got it right. He's obviously waited for this game to put out his best 15, Eddie Jones, that is. And in all honesty, I just struggle to see where Argentina get their points against them, because defensively England are quite good as well. So, you're looking at that total of 47.5. I'd struggle to see where Argentina can get the points, even to get that total over as well. And this game kind of just strikes me as kind of a 31 kind of 10 kind of game. I honestly do believe that England's dominance is that far ahead of them, and I totally take Mark's points regards England not covering this line in a while against Argentina. But this Argentinian side has regressed immeasurably in the last year. For me, I thought they pretty much pinned their hopes that Ledesma coming in there would change things for them, but it hasn't. And it's hard to put your finger on it. Also, this humidity will not help them, because they really do want to play an offloading game. We saw that with the Jaguars Super Rugby and in the Rugby Championship, and that isn't the game to play at the moment out in Japan. I really do think that you've got to be a pragmatic team. I think Farrell and George Ford in that 10-12 channel, I think, the last game, obviously they're playing USA, but I thought George Ford is playing some superb rugby at the moment. And yeah, I'm happy to lay 14.5 here with England. I'm pretty low to do normally, Al, but yeah. I just can't see where Argentina compete with them here. And yes, Mark did make a good point about the scrum being good against France, but this English forward pack and this English set piece, their defence, the whole lot, I think they're peaking at the right time, and I think they win by 20 here.
I mean, we've not really talked much about England, which is not just because we've got a Welshman and two Irishmen here, but you mentioned there it's England's best 15. Is it England's best 15?
I think so.
That's. Yep. I mean, if you and you're talking about their amazing defence and their ability to keep Argentina out. I don't know. I mean, you got Ford at 10. It's a potential weakness. You got Watson at 14, who's not the best tackler in the world. Johnny May, who every time he makes a tackle celebrates. You've got opportunities there to get at them in the backs, which is how Argentina want to play these days, isn't it? Do you really feel that England are that solid and impenetrable against what is still quite a dangerous Argentina side once they get?
Yeah, I think even bringing in John Mitchell as defence coach is a massive thing for them. I mean, they lost Paul Guster back to Harlequins in that role, and that was a bit of a blow. But no, I do think they'll have enough. You see, what happens with Argentina, you saw it in the France game as well, is just they do suffer from a real lack of composure in the opposition's 22, and they can go through some great phase play, and you just always get a feeling that there's going to be a knock on here or something. But I don't really get that with England. I just do believe that they'll have enough here to kind of cover the number. Like I said, I struggle to see where you can make the case for Argentina. I just don't see it, and I haven't seen it in this tournament. They had a gilt-edged opportunity to come back against France. They didn't play for the first 40 minutes, and obviously France left them right back into it. They were exceptionally disappointing against Tonga, I thought, the last day as well. And I think England are probably peaking at the right time.
Mark, right of rebuttal here, mate. Well, what do you make of Sully's analysis there? Can you pick any holes in that?
No, I think it's fair enough. I couldn't really disagree with most of it. The thing on the humidity and playing the offloading game, I'll probably take a small issue with, just because we've seen two great instances in the last week of teams who've successfully done it. Maybe not have won the match in terms of Australia in the second half against Wales, who ran the ball at every opportunity and caused Wales huge amounts of problems, and then Japan as well against the Irish. So there is precedent if they've got that composure, which is the issue. Argentina will want to throw it around, because if you're going to try and play a power game against England, you're going to come a cropper. So, I completely take the point, but this isn't, England is still building, I believe. Next week against France is their big one. This is Argentina's do or die game, really. So, if England are leading by 20 points with 15 to go, I wouldn't be surprised to see Eddie Jones start hooking a few players and making a few changes. with next week in mind. Whereas Argentina, this is the last chance really. So if they are leading by 20, there's still an opportunity there for that lead to be cut, and that's why that sort of 3-score line in terms of the 14.5, I think, is in my favour, because those kind of late points when Argentina should, in theory, be going for 80 minutes, England could easily let up for the last 10. It should really play into my favour here, but I completely take Sully's point. I know this is going to be a bit of a Marmite selection for people listening, but for me, I want to be with the team at the start.
Yeah, I mean, Sully, you mentioned could be a sort of 31-10 sort of game. Have you got? I know you're always a man for the totals. Have you got any view? I mean, it looks like it's going to be settling somewhere around the late 40s potentially for that total, doesn't it? I mean, do you have a view on that? Are you looking at the unders here possibly?
I don't know. That's a hard one to call. Again, looking at the kind of the weather forecast on Tokyo. Yeah. I mean, the problem is it doesn't seem to kind of predict humidity. So, like Mark said, that's what we should be looking for. Like, I mean, it's predicting 0 millimeters of precipitation in Tokyo on Saturday morning, but
that's not a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, just can't get the humidity. No, look, I mean, look, myself and Mark, we oppose each other. I think we have very different opinions in Argentina, obviously, because the French game. Now, obviously, let's be honest about it, I was pretty lucky to get away with that one. But I just think England will just show far more than France will, and I think they'll blow them out of the water.
What do you make of the kind of the weird dynamic in this group? You know, there's been a lot of talk, quite open talk, about how England would be better off finishing second here. And New Zealand are really looking dangerous at the moment. Yeah. So I mean, if you wanted to face them, you'd probably want to wait until the final if you absolutely had to. I mean, it doesn't really alter the dynamic of this game because you can't afford to be losing this game and then going into a must-win game against France for England. But I mean, just looking a little bit further ahead, do you think there's anything in that, or do you think that's the kind of thing media people like to talk about?
Yeah, I think it's something that we like to talk about, and it is a valid point. However, it's just not a sport that you can play kind of, thinking that way, because you'll get yourself killed. I don't believe that. I mean, look, if you think about it, if you're Eddie Jones in this English squad, do you want to go into the quarterfinals, with winning 4 games in the group, or do you want to, have a loss come out? I think winning is always the best habit. If you gave that question to Joe Schmidt, no, he would say the exact same thing, because that Japan defeat probably has knocked the Irish for 6. But yeah, it's a valid point, but I just don't think that we can put any kind of stock into it.
Yeah, fair play. I mean, Mark, let's move on to some of the other games. We've got a fair few to get through for the rest of this weekend. And sticking on Japan, Samoa. You've been on Japan's side a couple of times so far. You mentioned them in the outrights as potential qualifiers from this group before, which is looking a very good shout now. What do you make of this game? An interesting dynamic in this one as well.
Yeah, it is. I was surprised by the outcome of last weekend's game, obviously, but not surprised by Japan's ability or their approach to it. As we sort of talked about in the pre-tournament chat, that they've sent a few sort of warning signs out before the competition, and over the past 12 months, the dangers that they pose. What's frustrating from our side is, Ireland are in complete control at 12-3 up and dominating that in that first 20-30 minutes. But huge credit to Japan. They played with the sort of freedom and the intensity and the underdog spirit, which kind of earns everyone's respect. Didn't happen against Russia, which we talked about last week, maybe for expectation reasons, which kind of coming into this match kind of presents a new challenge for them. The expectation to go back in as hosts and kind of put down another marker, because they are expected to win this match. They've got a 20-point handicap hurdle to overcome, which does look a little bit steep. Samoa have got a quick turnaround from Monday, where they just didn't show up at all against Scotland. Very limited in their attacking game. I've not seen this, but Ed Fido obviously got sent off for 2 yellow cards. Looks like he's available, but otherwise they've still got 2 players suspended. They're a forward-focused team with what I believe is quite a limited game plan in attack. Quite rigid defensively too. Their discipline is atrocious. The Samoans 4 yellows and 1 red already this competition in 2 games. I just get the impression Japan will really relish those open spaces in the second half when they open up through fitness fatigue or possible sim binnings as well. Samoa have made 6 changes from the Scotland game, but they were so poor all over the park, 20-0 down at half time, 2 penalty tries in the second half. I just think they're going to be run out of gas in this game, and Japan's legs have told in the second half in both matches so far. They're accustomed to the humidity, the home advantage, the perfect schedule. Everything is really in their favour here. So for me, it's an in-play game to be looking at. I want to see how things develop in the first 40 minutes. But from the outset, I'd be looking towards the second half handicap here, which, looking at the kind of overall handicap, I'm probably expecting between 8 to 10 points really, which I think is very easily kind of eaten up in the second half if Japan get the chance to sort of run it around. So that's how I'd be approaching it.
Sully, how are you viewing this one?
I've disagreed in the previous game, but everything Mark said there, I totally agree with. Absolutely could not have put it any better. Just on the discipline, they gave 14 penalties away to Scotland, Samoa. That is, the weird thing about Samoa is, you look at their team sheet, and if you watch rugby regularly, you'll kind of say, oh, geez, this guy's a good player, this guy's a good player, that guy's a good player. And, you kind of probably get kind of lulled into the fact that, oh, they actually have probably a decent team. But whatever with this tournament, they just look an absolute mess. To even not score against Scotland, was, it's poor. And again, that was a kind of a hard watch, the humidity. But those guys should be able to play that kind of game. And it's just not clicking for them. I mean, 33 missed tackles against Scotland. And again, I know, Scotland are a pretty good attacking team anyway. Kicking game was atrocious as well. And the only maybe slight worry I would have with this is the fact that, Japan came in last week as, 20-point underdog or whatever, and they're coming in here as a 18 or 19-point favourite, total currently at 51.5. And that may be the only worry. There's a bit more expectation. We saw it in the first game where they're expected.
They froze a bit against Russia, didn't they?
But at the flip side of that is, maybe that was just that game that they kind of had to get out of their system. It was the opening night. This just, Mark's angle is absolutely perfect. I would suggest even if Japan are a bit sloppy in the first half, and you kind of nearly hope they will be for Mark's bet, obviously, that they don't get too far ahead. But look, Samoa just looked like a team that are kind of poorly conditioned as well. Obviously, there's actually a good lash of these players actually playing the Northern Hemisphere too, so they're starting into their season. So they would have done a lot of their preseason stuff with Samoa. And whatever they're doing, it's clearly not working, because they just looked absolutely shattered, even with a half an hour to go against Scotland the last days. So yeah, you'd be kind of hoping that it might be a sloppy first half and then absolutely plow into Japan in the second half. Maybe even second half high scoring half might be another angle as well. But this just reminds you, if Japan can keep it between the ditches here and just play within themselves, I think they'll win and they'll cover.
You'd be comfortable on the outright handicap as well, then, so.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think it's probably one I'm going to play. It might be have the very similar approach to Mark, is to kind of wait and see and kind of bide your time and maybe play a team total in play with Japan in running, kind of basing on the fact, and just see what Samoa are up to. But I could not. If you gave me even another try here with Samoa, I'd struggle to back them. They were actually quite well supported matchbook the last day against Scotland. They were kind of back down to 16 by the time of kickoff, which was interesting. There was a bit of support there, but I'm not totally sure where it's coming from. That was probably maybe more of a fade on Scotland than support for Samoa. So I'll wait and see. And like I said, very much echo Mark's sentiments on this one.
Yeah, I mean, another team sort of battling for the title of worst team in the World Cup is Namibia, taking on the minnows of New Zealand this weekend. This absolutely brutal game for them.
Well, they covered against South Africa. I have absolutely no idea how they covered against South Africa, but they did cover against South Africa.
Did you bet on South Africa?
Oh no! Well, you remember we were talking about it last week. I said, gun to the head, I would take Namibia plus 51.5. It actually went off at 61.5 here at Matchbook. But I mean, when a team scores 3 points and still covers that kind of spread against the second best team in the world, in my opinion, then yeah, there's something kind of not quite right with this tournament. I mean, you'll be absolutely tilting if you're on South Africa, which there were plenty of people on South Africa, of course. There wasn't too many takers on Namibia, even plus 59 or plus 60. And just, I kind of alluded to it last week. I think they have a bit of respect for them, the South Africans, and they left Namibia off the hook. It's interesting, 68.5 is the line this week. So they have regressed 7 or 8 points from that line against South Africa, so which makes sense. But I mean, look, New Zealand gave Canada 63 and couldn't cover that, even though Canada didn't score. And obviously, when you see Bowden Barrett racing through over halfway in the 81st minute, you're thinking, right, if you're on Canada, you're absolutely donezo here. And we talked about it off air, Mark. It's so hard. Even like Mark, if I give you Namibia plus 68.5, it's such a horrible watch to get out of bed early on a Sunday morning to watch this one. The All Blacks could pick their number.
Yeah, it's not a game really I want to get involved in. I compared it with Manchester City in the Premier League. You got to take you got to have balls of steel really to sort of approach these handicaps and oppose these teams, because it can be complete car crashes. They've covered in the 2 spreads so far, but New Zealand scored all their points and didn't score in the final quarter, which is almost unheard of, especially in this World Cup as well. Namibia conceded 9 tries against the Springboks. We're looking for New Zealand to score 1 more here, really, to cover the spread. It's not really one for me. If I had to, I probably would take the All Blacks. But, in this World Cup, do you really want to be waiting for a team to score 70? I'm not sure. Probably the first game I'm not going to set the alarm for as well, actually watch, to be honest.
I knew I'd crack you by week 3, Mark. I fucking knew it. I absolutely knew it. I got one good bad beat story here, Al, before we move on. That New Zealand Canada game, at half time, the New Zealand team total was, what was it? Basically, it was to score 39.5 was the line for New Zealand in the second half. They had 28 within the first 12 minutes of the second half. So you're saying you need 12 points in 30 minutes as a 63-point favorite against Canada. So that's how my World Cup is going so far. That will just give you a little kind of microcosm of how it's going for me, and it's been a frustrating one, but
Yeah, I think if we can maybe just explain this for the listeners. Before we came on, Sully led off with, "I fucking hate this World Cup."
And we're meant to be kind of pushing these things, but yeah, look, I think there may be a spark. I don't know if it comes this weekend. I think we'll wait for the Japan Scotland could be a cracker. I mean, look, we had Wales and Australia last weekend.
Game of the tournament so far.
Yeah, it was an absolute belter. So I just think there's been more bad than good. I mean, look, even this week, you've had 3 teams who haven't scored. I mean, and people aren't even kind of getting surprised by this anymore. Like, I mean, surely, if you can't even just score a try towards the end of the game, I don't know. It just doesn't strike. It strikes me as the gap between the rich and the poor has just got that bit bigger, even from 2015. I just think we had a better World Cup. Maybe it's the climate that we had in England in 2015 was just that bit more better for rugby. I'm not totally sure, but we're in whinge mode at the moment. But quickly on that New Zealand one, Jordy Barrett at 10 is an interesting one.
Yeah, I was just going to come to that. Yeah, the team selection is an interesting one there, especially for those of us who backed Jordy Barrett top try scorer.
Well, the good thing about that is that he's not going to be substituted here, in my opinion, because they don't have any fly half cover. Unless they turn Ben Smith, I think he's probably maybe their kind of like auxiliary kind of guy. But I think it's a wise move there, because obviously it was interesting that he still played Bowden Barrett at 15 the last day against Canada with that kind of point spread, and still had Mo'unga, who really seem to be kind of, I was probably skeptical. But I was skeptical of this pre-tournament, this 10-15 combination, but they seem to be kind of getting it nailed down pretty much, and that's a lot of Mo'unga kind of coming into his own as well, and just not missing any kicks, which is kind of an upgrade. That was the only thing, if you want to criticise Bowden Barrett, it's his goal kicking. But Jordy Barrett, I said it off there, I'm struggling to even remember, even at Super Rugby level, where he played for the Hurricanes at 10. I do know that he's played in the NPC or the Mitra Cup, for they got Wellington. Yeah, is he playing with Wellington? Whichever team he's with there, and he has played 10 a bit there. But look, he's playing in Namibia, so Namibia aren't going to be even as strong as counties of Tasman or Manawatu or whoever the hell is playing down there now. So I mean, look, 68.5. But I mean, look, the other game Sunday morning, I'd be interested to get Mark's views on this one. Look, France. I mean, I honestly didn't think that France were going to improve in this tournament, but I mean. That was, again, how the hell did they cover that game the last day? They're up by 3 points with 11 minutes to go. If USA had numerous try scoring chances, especially towards the tail end of the first half, and they probably would have covered. If you're on the USA plus, you're on the right side there. Let's be honest, guys. I mean, you're on the right side. You've picked the right side, and you've actually still lost your bet. So my condolences. Mark, what do you think of France minus 25.5? Fill your boots.
No.
Definitely not fill your boots.
No. Yeah, 3 of their 5 tries came in the final 15 minutes. And anyone who watched that game would have said, France were absolutely appalling for an hour.
Yeah.
Absolutely dreadful. USA were good. I don't think they're a million miles off Tonga either. So I think all the stereotypes come out to play here with France. Typically unpredictable. Excuse me. They've not put anywhere near in an 80-minute shift yet, so it's hard to really have faith in them doing so anytime soon. Tonga obviously covered the spread against England when they were 40-point dogs, and against Argentina as well, when they conceded all their points in the first half hour as well, scored twice themselves. It's not really a massive match for me. I've got to be honest, I'm not hugely interested in this. France, it's their 3rd game in just over 2 weeks, so the schedule's been pretty tough for them. They've got the biggest game of the tournament next weekend as well. So kind of going back to what we talked about with England and Argentina, if they are up by 25, 30 points, they may well just empty the bench and just see this game out. As we saw with Argentina against Tonga, really, you can kind of hold them at arm's length, really, and just get the job done with a bonus point. I think that's how they're going to approach it, really. I don't expect an 80-minute display at all. Tonga have actually played above themselves compared to where I thought they were coming into this competition. So respect to them for that. But the trepidation really comes, this is their 3rd tough game now of the competition on the spin. That's going to take something out of them, sort of legs-wise, physical-wise as well. And as I said at the start, once you get into sort of the 3rd, 4th weeks, I do start to worry about these Tier 2 teams. Excuse me, after a tough schedule. So if I had to, it'd be Tonga with the start, but it's not something I'm overly keen on.
What about you, Sully? You're going to be smashing into France here. Quite an interesting looking side they've sent out for that game as well.
I'm definitely not going to smash into France. Let me tell you. I don't know, but maybe taking France plus with someone at some stage. Yeah, I mean, look, it's an interesting one. And Tamac's back at 10. Penno's back on the side. It was great. He's always a good guy. If you're looking to back try scorer markets, kind of multi-try scorer markets, he's a guy you should be looking at because I just don't really think people can tackle him. He's just an agile runner and he's fantastic.
As soon as he learns how to pass, he's going to be the player.
He doesn't want to pass. He doesn't need to pass. But despite not to see Japan starting this one from my try score bed, I kind of dropped the ball a small bit on that one, actually. When we were doing the outright one, I actually forgot that they were bringing 3 scrum halves, which was a poor one on my side. But Bongi Umbadambi, he's still on the spirit.
I thought you were going to come through with that. I gave Sully some shit about that, tipping up a second choice hooker on a win-only try score market. But the lads, that's got 2 already. Could get a couple more.
Just don't know. Yeah, you just don't know. We're recording on Friday morning. They're playing at Italy. You just don't know. He could come off the bench, get a couple of rolling balls. My God, those South Africans, they love those rolling balls, and they're very, very, very good at it. But yeah, back to France. I have no idea. Like, honestly, who knows? The centre combination is kind of interesting. Vaktawa and Gatun. Gatun is normally 13, but I think they'll switch around a bit. But yeah, I think that game is later on Sunday morning. I think we'll go back to our normal Sunday morning lions. I would suggest, and record them. Let's not worry about it.
So before we wrap up with best bets for the weekend, can I persuade you guys to have a view on Wales Fiji? Mark, have you got any early thoughts on that one?
You have to get your Welsh stuff in there. I love that. Even
if I had to right now, I want to see the team sheet. I don't really like betting too early, especially in the Rugby World Cup. I've got a few things I want to sort of cross off the list before I get into that game properly. But right now, it'd be Fiji with a start, or probably Wales by 11 to 20, kind of just hitting in between the 2 handicaps. I thought my actually more interest, if I can, would just be Australia-Uruguay on Saturday morning. Obviously, quite an unexciting game on paper, but Michael Checker's, I love Michael Checker from his Leinster days, but he's really entertaining in this World Cup with his outspoken words about referees. But excuse me, he's just confusing himself, I think, with his team selections. He's gone back to Whiteley, Alafano at the halfback combination here against Uruguay. And I think in hindsight, he should have started possibly with them last weekend, because how did Australia cause Wales so many problems? It's playing their running style, playing expansive style, opening Wales up, running the legs off them, really trying to attack Wales in the same sort of approach as Wales. A kicking game with two reasonably unadventurous halfbacks didn't really work. So I'm quite keen to see what they do this weekend. They'll obviously win the match. They've made 13 changes, but they've been hampered by really slow starts now in both of their matches, and then they've really kind of, again, going back to Checker, he's tried to adapt his team sheet and approach to what the opposition are, rather than focusing on his own team. So I'm hoping that they sort of follow a similar pattern here, because Uruguay, I've talked about them last week as well, they have progressed significantly. I thought they caught Fiji cold, probably more to do with Fiji rather than themselves in that match. And then had the 4-day turnaround against Georgia, where they barely made any changes to their team, held them to 12-7 at half time, and then fell apart in the second half. Sully mentioned their defensive issues too, but they scored 37 points in those 2 games, which is fair enough, but only 6 of them have come in the second half. Fiji scored 3 tries in the second half, and Georgia scored 21-0 in the second half against them as well. So kind of going back to the Japan-Samoa game, taking a similar sort of stance here, watching the first half, seeing how it unfolds, and then potentially smashing into Australia on the second half handicaps or similar sort of approaches. Australia on the totals, second half high scoring, all that sort of stuff. I do expect them to come good in the second half when the game opened up.
Yeah, I mean, so let's wrap it up with some best bets for the weekend. I've got a horrible feeling here, lads, that one of you is going to say England and one of you is going to say Argentina. We're going to leave the listeners no better off. But I mean, let's kick it off with Sully first. What's your best bet of the weekend, mate?
Yeah, England minus 14.5.
Simple as that. Right, I'm praying here, Mark. What's your best bet of the weekend?
Okay, I'll tier it, because my best bets will be the Japan and Australia in the second half handicaps or similar sort of approaches, but we can only back them in play really, or see how the game plans out. But yeah, in terms of a pre-match punch right now, it's Argentina with the start against England. Happy to be proven completely wrong here, but I just think it's last chance saloon, and they can keep this reasonably competitive. England should win, will probably win, but I think it'll be by a narrower margin than the spread at the moment.
Hey, Alan, what a fantastic podcast we have. We get both sides. You can't lose, like, so.
Well, you can. I mean, you can't on the matchback handicaps, can you? Get yourself a 3-way handicap and you can still lose.
Try to hit a middle somewhere, I don't know. No, but look, I mean.
Just on that, actually, Sully, what kind of line would you, how big does the line get before you sort of decide England aren't a bet? Because for me, it was kind of around 13.5. So just having that extra, it's a 3-score play really, which is what makes it a bet really for me for Argentina. If it was 13.5, maybe I wouldn't be looking at this.
Yeah, no, I've actually backed it early in the week, minus 13.5. That's no good. No, I don't want to be after timing you. But look, I'm just happy enough to go as far as the 14.5, 15.5, and maybe cut myself there, like, just in case, it gets 16 and 17, gets a bit stupid then that stage. But look, we can only kind of look at the lines that we have at the time. There's no point in me saying back minus 13.5. You can still probably back it. You're going to have to give up a lap, is obviously that 14 is such a key number, and I just wouldn't recommend going down to 1.7 or 1.66 to get that 13.5. If you're getting, like, you're still going to get pretty good price. You're nearly even money 14.5 a matchbook. So yeah, I'll be happy enough with that.
All right, great stuff, lads. Thanks very much for all of that. Good luck to one of you. May the best man win, and we'll look forward to having a chat about what happened next week. Thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next week for some more betting tips for the Rugby World Cup. Take care.